On June 11th, 2022, Sheetal Patel and her husband were sitting on a rock, cooling off in the Colorado River after a long hike in 116-degree heat down the Angel Bright Trail. They were preparing to start their trip on the lower canyon at the Pipe Creek put-in just downstream from Phantom Ranch. It was roughly 1:45 p.m. when it was reported that Sheetal's water bottle fell into the current. She reached for it and was swept away into Pipe Creek Rapids. She was not wearing a life jacket. The current swept her 1/2 to 3/4 miles downstream before rescuers caught up to her. Unfortunately, she drowned. This case study focuses on the issue of improper supervision involving the cooling off activity. It resulted in a fatality. The 3-mile stretch near Phantom Ranch, including Pipe Creek, is a dangerous stretch of the Colorado River. There were 13 swimming fatalities on this 3-mile stretch, one more than the entire Colorado River. In addition, the National Park Service regulations prohibit swimming and bathing in locations immediately above rapids, eddies, and riffles or near rough water. To cool off from the strenuous hike in and the 116-degree temperature, the guides introduced the cooling off activity. The guests stood shin deep in the water and splashed water on themselves. The cooling off activity wasn't much fun. It didn't take long for the guests to move to the deeper eddy just downstream. In an initial statement to the National Park Service investigators, a guest admitted that we were messing around. From their behavior, it may be concluded that the guests didn't fully appreciate the danger present, and perhaps they needed a higher standard of care, including proper supervision. One guide passing by the eddy warned the group, "Don't get too close to the current." Another guide warned the group to keep in the shallows. A third guide, rigging the raft nearest to the eddy, commented, "And one of these guys dove in head first, and I shouted out to him, 'Hey man, there is a strong current there and a rapid down there.'" In contrast to the guests, the guides recognized the dangers present, yet they took no further action and went on with their business. Getting ready for the trip, the guides were busy working on their specific tasks. At the time Sheetal and her husband were sitting on the rock outcropping, 2 guides were on their boats rigging and organizing. 3 guides were putting away lunch. 3 guides, including the trip leader, were providing medical care to a heat stroke victim and determining the need for medical evacuation. Sitting on the rock unsupervised, Sheetal reached for the water bottle she dropped in the water. The current caught her and swept her 1/2 to 3/4 miles downstream before rescuers finally caught up with her lifeless body. There are 3 types of supervision. General supervision means that the leader must be in the activity area and overseeing the activity. Overseeing the activity includes having a systematic oversight of the activity, the ability to move to specific supervision, and to be readily accessible. In this incident, the guides viewed the activity area as the entire put-in site, and not the immediate site around the 2 eddies. A critical element in this incident is that the guides were not readily accessible and were unable to move quickly to specific supervision. For the ease of understanding, consider the guide's supervision in terms of a swimming pool lifeguard. The lifeguard's chair is located next to the swimming pool, where the lifeguard can systematically survey the swimmers. The activity area is defined as the immediate area surrounding the pool. The lifeguard can quickly transition to a swimmer in distress and render assistance. Transitional supervision occurs when the leader moves from general to specific supervision or back from specific to general supervision. Transitional supervision is the time and distance that it takes for the leader to render assistance. In this case, but not always, transitional supervision embodies the rescue. The guides heard the yells of the guests who saw Sheetal being swept away. They had to drop what they were doing, grab their life jackets, and put them on, launch a raft, and then pursue Sheetal. The 15-mile-an-hour current moved Sheetal at 22 feet per second downstream. By the time the guides launched their rafts, Sheetal was already 1,000 feet downstream. It took 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile for the guides to catch up to her. In terms of time and distance, transitional supervision was too long. Continuing with the lifeguard analogy, assume that the lifeguard is busy at the snack bar. After hearing the yells of swimmers that someone is drowning in the deep end, he reacts. When seconds count, transition supervision takes too long to reach the victims and render assistance. The result is that the lifeguard was not readily accessible and was unable to move quickly to specific supervision. Specific supervision means that the leader has hands-on involvement in the activity. When the guides who chased Sheetal finally extricated her from the water, they began CPR. Rendering first aid is typical of hands-on involvement of specific supervision. Specific supervision for the pool lifeguard is extricating the victim from the pool and performing first aid if needed. The lifeguard example illustrates that there might be something amiss with what the guides did. Working in reverse, transitional supervision in outdoor settings often dictates the activity area and in general supervision. A guide standing on shore with a throw bag has less than 5 seconds to act. A typical throw bag contains 50 to 75 feet of rope. After 5 seconds, the victim could easily be out of reach over 100 feet downstream. The actual rescue in this case took too long. In this case, transitional supervision determines the activity area. It includes the 2 eddies and the immediate shore bordering the water. More importantly, the guide can corral guests in the eddy and prevent them from getting too close to the main current. Given the difficulty of rescue at this site, the guide needs to prevent the incident from happening before it happens. At this site, the margin of error is small, and it is easy to see why the National Park Service prohibits swimming immediately above rapids. Although supervision was the focus of this fatality, barrier analysis is a useful accident prevention model that could suggest additional approaches. In the model, there is a source, the current, of an unwanted energy transfer to the target, the waders in the eddy. Barriers are placed between the source and the target. Barriers might include wearing a life jacket, moving the activity, follow the NPS regulations, and of course, supervision. The holes in the Swiss cheese indicate that the barriers are less than adequate. Regulations are only as good as their enforcement. Individually and together, these barriers most likely would have prevented the fatality. This case study focuses on the issue of improper supervision involving the cooling off activity. It resulted in a fatality. Not only does this case study explain why improper supervision led to the fatality, but it explains how proper supervision could easily have helped to prevent this fatality. Along with the activity area, this case study uses the concepts of general, transitional, and specific supervision to explain why the fatality occurred. Barrier analysis showed that some relatively simple measures could have prevented this fatality. Often overlooked, this case study suggests the importance of focusing on transitional supervision in outdoor recreation settings, an important contribution.